Okay, so what I did, if you go in, depending on where you have it, I have it down in my my bar down on the bottom. I have the Illustrator icon. I just double click it. I open the window. Okay, or I open Illustrator. Could also be in your applications. Okay, but make sure you put it to whatever. If you're in Windows, or put it in your toolbar. Okay. The other thing with that is if you're opening something in Illustrator, you can either go up here. Let me get rid of this. You could also just go up to, or actually that's basically the two ways to do it. But if I want to open something, I could go, and I know you guys can't see my file menu up above, but I'm in File. And I could just go to Open, and I can open up a file from there once I'm open, okay? Usually what I do is I drag something onto the Illustrator icon, and that opens it up. Does that make sense? And then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to go New. And I get this, right? Which if you've been in Photoshop or any Adobe product, you're probably used to the screen, okay? Now, up here, it has certain formats that I can go into, like film and video. I use this a lot. This one is 1080p, so I do a lot of, like for this class, I do a lot of video and stuff like that. So I might open it to that size ratio. I can go to print. I can go to web, mobile, you know, just standard sizes. So I'm going to go to print. I like to use tabloid. And over here, I've got my orientation. I like it this way. I'm going to go okay. Okay. Now, Illustrator is resolution independent. Okay. So I'm not setting it up like I would in Photoshop and saying I need a 300 dpi image or I need a 72. It doesn't matter. Illustrator. Okay. Make sense? And up here, again, you can't see my file menu, but it's under Windows. Stop thinking of that window as Windows. That's actually all your palettes. So if I drop this down, I can go to, let's go to one that's not open. Let's go to image trays. And we'll bring up the tool set, the more advanced tool set for that particular tool, okay? And then I can take these, and if you see over here, there's a well right here. You want to work clean. You don't want these things floating all over your desktop. So I can take this and I can just anchor it over to here. And then I can just click it and use it from there. Now you can also pull it back out of there and put it back if you want. And we'll talk about custom workspaces in a day or two, okay? So I got my layers over here. And you can adjust these however you like. You can move them up and down and adjust them where you want. I want you to sort of get used to those a little bit, and then we'll talk about kind of creating a custom workspace. Now, whenever you grab a tool, you're going to have a control bar up here that's going to give you your most common used stuff for the parameters around that tool up in your control bar up here, okay? So if I change this to the pin tool, it will change. That's weird. I'll change it. Type changed over here. Eraser changed over here. So they change, you know, based on what tool it is, okay? Let's just start going through these. Okay, I'm gonna make a shape here just so I have something to play with. And if you guys notice right here, if you've been in Photoshop, you have a foreground and a background swatch. We don't have a foreground and background swatch. We've got a fill and we've got a line, okay? So if I click the fill and I go up to whatever, any of these color tools, my swatches, let's go to swatches. I can fill it, and then if I go, like right here, this little flip right here, I can flip that, or I can hit X and that will flip it. I'm going to pull this forward, and then I'm going to make this a different color. Let's just make it green. So now you got this box with the green outline, and up here in my control bar, I can make this width fatter. I can drop the opacity on it right here, and there's other things we can do we'll get into later. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, if I'm on my black arrow tool, I can grab this and I can move it. So what the black arrow tool is going to do is it's just, and by the way, you don't have to remember everything I'm saying right now. We're going to go over it as we're going through all this. I just want to quickly talk about all this. If I grab this, it's going to grab the whole thing. If I go to my white arrow tool and I click on this, let's click on it right here. There's a point right there. Now I can manipulate this just from the different points. And if this was a rounded object, let's go into an ellipse. By the way, if I hold, right now you can see it's free floating. If I hold shift, it's going to constrain it. So I'm going to go back up to my white arrow tool, click that outside line. You can see it gave me these handles. And I can also manipulate it that way. I can grab the points themselves and manipulate it. And I can bend and play with them, okay? So that's the difference between those two tools right there. Don't worry about this one yet. I don't think we need to worry about that yet. And this is one we're going to talk about a lot today is our pen tool. So the pen tool, and I'll go over this more in a minute. I can just control everything about the pen tool, okay? Don't worry about this curvature pen tool yet. By the way, the pen tool has add an anchor point, which is just that. I can come onto this existing line and I can add an anchor point into it, which will help me if I need to manipulate it. Or I can come in here and delete one. So I can just come in here and click on it and delete it. Or this converts it to an anchor, well, it converts it to a corner, okay? We'll talk about that in a minute. Type tool, click on the surface, type something. I can go back up to my black arrow tool, select the whole thing, hold shift. And then I can reset it. So it's not that different from any other type tool and almost anything else. Also, I can go to area type tool, type on a path, vertical. We'll get into all those later. This line one, let's worry about that later. Spiral tool, literally, this creates a spiral. I can add a color to it. I can fatten up the line. Also, on these kind of tools, if I click this and then I click on the surface, so I pick the tool and I click on the artboard, it will bring up this window where I can go, well, I want more, I want it to be a tighter spiral. I can flip them and go, okay, and it gets a tighter spiral, okay? And you'll see that on a lot of tools where they'll have that extra. By the way, any of these tools over here that have that little arrow on the bottom right, you can click and hold and you'll get other tools in here. I'm not worried about the other ones yet in here. This is just, you know, stock tools. And again, like with this star tool, I can come in here, pick the star tool. Let's put this over here. Click on the board, and I can go, I want how many points I want, radius. So this one has way more points, okay? And then you just have various shapes in here you can play with. Get into the flare tool later. This is a paintbrush tool, does what it says. Except the difference between this and Photoshop is this is now a vector line. So I can manipulate it again with my white and black arrow tools again, like we just did with the other ones, which we'll get into later. I don't want to get into that block thing, it's weird. Pencil tool, exactly what it says, it's a pencil. Smooth tool, get into that in a minute. Path eraser tool, get into that later. We don't care about that. Eraser, go ahead. Yeah.
What's the difference between the pencil and the pen?
Not a whole lot.
So they operate similarly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you have, I don't even know if you have that many, if you can just apply the same options to them. You know, the pencil one tends to be a little scratchier and thinner, but I don't know if it forces you to stay in, because once you create a vector line, you can kind of assign anything you want to it, okay? So to be honest with you, it seems like it could be combined into one tool to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I just wasn't sure if there was a difference that I
Yeah,
didn't know.
it seems to me like, because once you make that line, I can assign whatever I want to.
Right. And you can treat it however you want. Yeah.
Yeah. The eraser tool erases. The scissors tool, I can cut. Let's get this. I can just take a point with the scissors tool, click on the path. Go back to my white arrow tool, select that little area, and I can get rid of it. So it just does what it says. It's just a shape or a scissors tool. Rotate tool. So if I create something like this, I can go to the rotate tool and I can rotate it. But here's the thing with that, and with most of these tools in Illustrator, if you notice when I go to the rotate tool, there's a little anchor point right there in the center, okay? If I move that over here, it's gonna rotate around that, okay? And you'll see that's a common thing in Illustrator a lot, okay? One of the things I like about Illustrator is that it's sort of straightforward, okay? It's not as weird logic as Photoshop is to me. To me, it's fairly straightforward. Okay, so let's go. Here's the reflect tool, sort of the same concept. So let's go back to here. And if I want to, let's get something that has more of a direction to it. Hang on. So let's just make an ellipse. And then let's bend it on one side. It's a hot dog. So if I grab that and then I grab my reflect tool, again, I can take that little anchor point and I can set it somewhere. And then in this case, I'm going to hold Option. And I can create a mirror reflection of it. And it's going to rotate around wherever I put that little anchor point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And again, we'll get into all these tools, so don't worry about it. Now, here's something. This is if I have a shape here, and this next one right over here is the scale tool. So let's double click that, and I can just go up here and I can assign a value to it. So I could go, 54%. But what's important about this, and you need to do this when you start what we're going to do today, when you are doing your homework, you need to go down here to scale strokes and effects and just make sure that's clicked on, okay? Because what's going to happen if you don't is, let's say, and we're going to be doing some thin, thick line stuff today. If I don't click that and I create this really nice thin, thick line thing, and then I decide I want to make it smaller, it won't all scale down proportionally. What'll happen is it'll keep that same thickness and it'll scale down size-wise with these big fat lines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And what that means is, if I have that clicked, everything that I've done in whatever it is all gonna scale together. So I always make sure it's on. Usually, it's only if I'm going onto a new machine or something, or I've relaunched Illustrator or something. Once I turn it on, it seems to always just be on, okay? So just make sure it's on. You double click your scale tool right there, and it's right there, scale, strokes and effects. And let's see what else I have in here. Shear tool. Let's see if I can do it on this one. Again, I got to drop this anchor someplace. I'm going to put it right there. And then it lets me sort of scale this around like that based on that anchor point. So if I was going to do a cast shadow off this thing, I might do something like that. That's shear, reshape. Let's not worry about that yet. This one we're going to talk about in a minute, the width tool, which is one of my favorite things ever. This we'll talk about later because there's a couple different places you can do that. Free transform tool I'll talk about later. That I'll talk about later. Perspective for sure I'll talk about later. Mesh tool, again, I'll talk about that later. Gradient tool. So if I make a shape, let's get rid of this. And let's go. So let's go right here. So like we just talked about, under Windows, which you should just call your palettes, not Windows anymore, you'll find swatches. So here's my swatches. And right here, you guys notice there's a default gradient, white to black. So I'm just going to fill that. I got to make sure I'm not on line. I'm going to get rid of that. I want to pull that forward. And I'm going to go back to swatches. I'm going to fill it with a gradient. It's just how I usually do it. And then if I go right here to my gradient tool, it gives me this little, I forgot what they call it, attenuator or something. I'm going to hold it from the top and go down to the bottom. And I'm holding shift so it'll go straight. So now I've got a gradient going from top to bottom. If I wanted it to go the other way, I just pull it this way. And now it's, dark to light. If I click on, if I click on these points, I can come in here and change the color in a couple of ways. One is based on this, which is just your color mix. And one is based on, I can assign a color to it. And I can also assign opacity to it, okay? Which will come in really handy later. Or I can use this and go pick a color, okay? And then I can come down here and I can do the same thing down here and pick a different color, okay? Then this is sort of how they blend together right here. how they intermix. Okay, then I can take these points, I could pull this up. I could grab this one, hold Option and drag it and make another one. And maybe add another color in here. So on and so forth. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Eyedropper tool, all that does is sort of what it does everywhere. If I have this and I go, I want to try that. Actually, it's going to fill it with all this. Hang on. Let me get rid of this. If I grab, by the way, if I make this and it doesn't have a fill and I grab this, it's going to fill it with the gradient. It's not going to fill it with the individual colors. Okay. So basically, these would have to be, if I wanted to get a solid, I'd have to be picking these from a solid. So I can just grab this and do that. Okay. Now, another thing you could do with that tool is if I have type, and let's say it's specific, let's go to some, go to add. Let's go to add brush. And then I had some other type of type, like this one. And it was in a different format. Let's make it a different format. And it was doing this, and I want to make sure that it conforms to this. I can also use my eyedropper, and it'll apply the same color, the same font, and the same size. Okay. So if I want to create a multi-page document, this little Artboard tool, I can just take that again, hold Option, drag, and I can make a multi-page document. That comes in really handy for a lot of things. But one of the things I always liked about it is I can really make a quick portfolio out of it. So sometimes if I was having a conversation with somebody, I like to just show them what I think they need to see. I don't want them going to a website and seeing all sorts of things and getting the wrong view about what I do, which used to happen a lot. I can just quickly throw together a portfolio. I can save this as a JPEG or as a multi-page PDF. It'll make it automatically for me, and I can send that off, and I can have it in half an hour. Okay, this is just your zoom tool, and then this one is your move tool. By the way, if I'm in any other tool, I can just hold Shift and get the move tool. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. You just taught me 3 things. I'm really glad you just taught me.
So we got our line and fill down here. I don't want to get too much into that stuff down here. This down here will just set up my how I set up my workspace. I don't want to change it right now. And then this right here, I can add things and I can change. We'll talk about this later. I can arrange my toolbar, this one, the way I like. Okay. And I can add things or take things out. Okay. Like there's a lot of tools in here. I don't usually screw with it, but there's a lot of tools in here I really don't use that much or at all, really. Like I don't use the blob tool really at all and things like that. Okay. Now, the one I want to start talking about, let's start with this pen tool. So here's the thing with the pen tool. Most people, when I first started, I might have said this already, but when I first started with this at the dawn of time, when they showed me the pen tool, I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Okay, it's not. Okay. So the trick with it though, I want to click if I'm going to do a curve, and then I want to hit this point, you know, whatever point I want to make my curve at, and click and hold and then drag. Okay. So I think people think that you're going to grab this and sort of do this and draw it like that. And that's not what's going to happen. Okay. If you want to make a curve, you want to do it more like that. And then I can come over here, make my next curve, you know, and go around and complete it. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, if you guys notice, do you guys see that kink right there? Right?
Yes, very little.
Yeah, but there's a tool in here that I'm in love with. It's right where the pencil is. You go down here, it's a smooth tool, and I can just rub over that, and you can see it got rid of it. It just smoothed out my line, okay? Also, if I double click that tool, I can adjust the fidelity of it. Okay, it's actually dialed in pretty good for me right where it is. So I don't tend to do that very much. So if I come in here and I go and I make this, it's not bad enough. Let's do a worse one. More like that. Let's say I make a really inelegant line. Actually, let's do that. And then I'm going to come up here. Let me get rid of this. Okay. I'm going to make this up here. I want to go right here. And I'm going to grab my line again. And then that gives me up on my control bar my stroke weight. So I'm going to go fatter so we can see it. And you can see it's a funky line. Okay. So I'm going to take this tool. And it will smooth that whole thing out. I love this tool, by the way. I don't think they used to have it, or it wasn't as good years ago. So you can
I've tried to use it. I've never seen it work the way you're using it.
It does it on its own. Unless you used it a long time ago, I don't think it was as good a long time ago. And I think there was also a point where I used this so they didn't have it at all. So there it is, okay? Which is the greatest thing in the world.
So you just pass it over the line?
Yeah, you select it and then just rub it over the line, like over the points you want to fix. See how it's adjusting them?
Oh, yeah, got it. Great.
So let's make another line. Let's look at, basically, I want you to use the pin tool is what we're going to start on, the smooth tool, and then we're going to use something called the width tool. So let's change this to black, this line. And let's make another line. And now I'm going to go back with my smooth tool because it's a little funky right there. A little funky. And sometimes you have to kind of smooth it out. And again, you can double click it and adjust the fidelity of it if you want more or less. They've got it pretty dialed in, at least for me. Everybody's different. Let's see what that looks like. That's not terrible. Okay, so let's go here now. Here's the other tool that I'm in love with. Right here is your width tool. So I can come over here and you can see how it's adding that little line, or I can just let it lock into a, what do you call it? A point, and I'm going to grab it and I can fatten out that line, and then I can come over here, grab it again. And if you see right here, it gives me 2 points right here, and I can just pull those in and I can make a perfect inked line.
That's awesome.
I know, it's amazingly awesome.
Epic.
That's more than awesome. That you're right. I said you said it's unbelievable. I've needed that forever.
So I don't know if you guys ever noticed this. You guys see good coloring books, how they're inked like insanely perfectly? Yeah?
Yes,
That's this.
Yeah.
I can never do.
That's this tool. Okay? That's how they do it now. Nobody's doing that by hand anymore. They do it like this. So let's look at how we're going to apply this, okay? So I have this guy, okay? Again, I don't like Pokemon. This was just the right amount of not good and okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is how we're going to do this. So I brought this in. So I can go in here and go file. So I'm on file. Oh, let's just make it empty. Okay, so also, if you guys haven't been in layers before, you probably have. But in my layers palette, it's just like Photoshop. So I can come down here, create new layer. So I can just click that, or I can delete a layer by clicking the trash can, okay? So for this, I just got a layer, and then I'm gonna go, let's turn this. And then by the way, over here, just like Photoshop, you can turn these on or off, and you can lock them, okay? So I have that locked. So I'm gonna go place, oops, that's not what I meant to do. I'm gonna go file, place. It'll come out here and it'll let me grab my, it's this JPEG right here, or PNG. And I can just double click that and it will place it in, there it is. Go click it and there it is, right? That's not the one I'm working off of, but that's the rendered one, okay? This is where we'll get to with our color, okay? Does that make sense? We just go to place, yeah?
Yes.
Or you can just do this. Here it is. So I can just take the JPEG, drag and drop it. There it is. And another thing here, you guys, because we're going to want to do this today, the difference between this and Photoshop, if you notice, you see that line right there? That square?
Yes, that's the artboard, is it not?
Yeah, so the artboard's smaller than the image. So I can either shrink the image, grab it here, hold Option, because that Option will make it shrink down from the center, or just hold Shift, but either Option, Shift, or Shift. And I could shrink it down to the right size, right? But if I don't want to do that, here's the difference between this and Photoshop is I'm just going to click off of it so nothing's selected. I can go right here to Document Setup, Edit Artboards, and then I get this and I can, oops, I just screwed up. I can just grab this and I can adjust it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Get rid of that. And let's go just say that I put it here, okay? So here it is. Now, once I drop that in here, this is my template, okay? I always just call it template, you can call it whatever you want. So if I click the word, I'm gonna be able to change the word, but if I double click the bar, it will give me this layer option thing, okay? And I've got it right here, I've got checked, usually it's unchecked. I can go dim images to, and I'm gonna say dim it to, let's try 50%. That's not enough. So I'm gonna go dim it to 30%. That's probably okay. I'm gonna go to 25, see that. That's better. Okay, and if you notice, I have this locked because I don't want to touch this layer anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want to keep my layers smart, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna make another layer. And let's just say I call this ink. This is gonna be my inking layer. I'm gonna get rid of this fill, so I click that little fill tab and I just go, I don't want to fill, bring this back up. Now I'm going to go get my pen tool. And this is kind of how we're going to do this. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to start, let's start somewhere easy. Here, I'm going to go click and I can make this whole leap, I think, in one bound, okay? And yeah, I can. So I just pulled that, I line it up, boom, okay? Now, and then, by the way, see how it's hanging on? If you hit return, it'll let go. So now, every now and then, I got to turn this off and see how I'm doing. This is too soon. I normally wouldn't. And here's another thing. Sometimes, if I'm going to go start to make, because here's what you don't want to do, you guys. Because this is the part of the reason, let's make this a fatter line so we can see it better. And let's also make this red. Now we can really see it better. We want to learn how to put our line work together because this is what I want you to understand here. This is not what I just said in that amateurish fill a shape thing. This line work is going to be independent of your fill. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want these lines here. What is working about this drawing is they have a little bit of overlap. What people start to do here is they make this line, then they just connect this line, then they connect this, like, no. These are different lines because otherwise I can't have this overlap, okay? So sometimes you'll go like that and it'll want to grab the next line and connect it. If it does that, select the line, and then you can go up here to Object. Okay, I'm in the File menu, Object, and I can just go to Lock and Selection. There's a little pop-out. Selection, and that will lock that. So when I make the next thing, it's not going to connect. And then I'm going to make this better, and I'm going to overlap this too, because I like to improve it. And then let's see if it'll, yeah, it's letting me just, okay, now here, there's kind of like, it's sort of a, I mean, maybe I can make it all in one pass. Not really. So I'm going to go to here, make the first part of the pass, let go. Then I'm going to hold down Command, which turns this into my white arrow tool or Control, Command or Control, right? I'm going to click the pasteboard and let's go. Then I'm going to grab it again and let it connect and finish this little curved idea. Now this is someplace where I'm going to hold down this again, click the pasteboard. So what I want you to understand here is there's three things with the pen tool. I'm in the pen tool. I don't want to leave the pen tool. I don't want to come up here and go, oh, I'm going to do a corner point, so I'm going to drop to here. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to do everything while I'm in the pen tool. So when I'm making this, I can hold Command. I can either hit this to get it to let go, but I can hold Command and that will turn into my white arrow tool and I can click that and it'll let go. And this will make sense as you're working through this. And then I can re-grab it and start the next part of my curve if I need to do that. Now, the other thing is, let's look at this. So this line here is a little funky. So I would go to my white arrow tool probably. Usually I need to do this in my other one, but let's see if it'll work. Yeah, it's fine. So I might have to clean that up. Now, sometimes, let's look at this. If I go, let's see. If I use these Bezier handles to do that, see how it's affecting both sides of that? Can you guys see that?
Yes.
It's affecting both sides of this line. So let's do this again. Which is good, but sometimes I don't want that. So again, I can go to my Option key now instead of my Command key. I can go to my Option key. Oops. And I can grab it with that. And if you see now, it made it a corner tool. It will only affect one side. That's really all you got to remember about this tool is you're either holding down Command to get the white arrow tool or you're holding down Option to create a corner. Does that make sense?
Is just for us Windows folks, is Command Control?
Yes, Command
Option is
Control
Alt.
and Options Alt. Yes.
Got it. Just making sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
And they're not spaced correctly if you ever notice in Windows.
Yeah, it always tricks you.
Yeah, it's annoying. I used to actually have a boss who actually liked that. I think it was just because he was on Windows for so long. I go, dude, that's design-wise, that's terrible. I'm sorry, it is. So, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through this. Let's look at this one here. I'm going to go to almost where that curve is, where it turns. And then I'm going to hold Command, click off of it. Now, why did I do that? Because I can't make this severe curve and this curve in this thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now I'm going to reconnect to it, make this little curve, click off of it again. And this next one I can probably make in one pass. So let's look. And you'll get intuitive about this. Let's see if we can do it. Yeah. So then I just need to pull this in. No, not quite. So let's go half. I'm going to click off of it. And then I'm going to end up with that little kink there. So I'm going to come in here with that. And I could adjust it and make sure it's perfect. Okay, then every now and then I come here and I turn off this layer. And just go, okay, everything's okay. Because here's what happens in this exercise, you guys. People hand these in and we're looking at them. I go, oh, that's pretty good. And then I turn off the template layer and it's a wobbly mess and nothing connects and everything's just a mess because the line underneath is making them think that it looks pretty good. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And what you got to understand here, let's look at this. What needs to connect and what doesn't? So like I'm going to want this line here, and I'll talk about this in a minute why. I want this line here to be independent for sure. So this one, and I probably can't make this in one pass. Nope. So this one, let's see if I can just do it. Yeah, that's not too bad. And then I'm going to let go. And then I'm going to grab my Command, my white arrow tool, adjust it. And then this one, I might turn this off real quick to see if I have any kinks. No kinks, that's not bad, okay? And then I think that this one can now look, if I try and go back here and grab this, see how it's gonna grab the old one? So I'm gonna go up here, go Object, Lock, Selection. By the way, that's just Command 2. Okay, and by the way, when you wanna unlock them, you go back up to Object, Unlock All, and it'll unlock all your line work, okay? Both under Object. So I've got it locked, so it won't grab. And I go, I think this and this can be the same line, I think, okay? You've got to sort of start figuring out how you're going to ink these things. And it just takes a little bit of experience. Some of you might have already done some of this, I don't know. And then there's that, because I can't make this severe curve. And I'm going to double check this, make sure I don't have a kink, no kinks. And then I'm going to go, I think all this can be one line. And I think I have a kink in it. That's good. No, it's not too bad. Now here, I don't like that. I don't want that open point there. So I'm going to go back to my white arrow tool, grab this little point, pull it out, and make sure that they meet up nicely. Okay, so I'd make sure I don't have all these open points unless I want them. And part of the reason that I did this line by itself is because when I come in here, I'm going to talk about this in a second. I'm going to go up to Object, Unlock All. When this, I'm going to put the light over to this upper left, and I'll talk about this in a minute. And I can use the black arrow tool because this is by itself. When I go and I make my line here, let's go to our width tool. I'm going to make this line fairly fat right there. Why am I doing that?
Gives a character.
No, because the light's there. See where the light is? So here's how you think of, and this is important, you guys, if you haven't learned this already. When you're inking something, whether it's a sketch or a final inked thing like this, because I get people all the time and they go, and I had a teacher do this to me. And I was looking at, I was drawing from some drawing because I go, man, it's such a cool drawing. It's so simple, but it's so punchy and so voluminous and all that. And then of course I was doing it and my proportions were good and all that kind of stuff, but it looked flat. It just didn't look very good. And so I took it to this teacher and I go, hey man, why is this like that? And that's like this. And he goes, oh, because that beautiful thin and thick line. But he didn't say why. Okay, there has to be a logic to almost everything you do. And the logic of a starting logic or a general rule of thumb, or just in general, light away from the light or lines away from the light are going to get fatter and heavier to indicate shadow value. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, I have that issue.
Yeah, what?
I have that issue all the time. I just start drawing and I forget where my light is to try to get depth.
Sometimes if I need to, I don't do it that often. Sometimes I do. I'll just put a little dot or something over there, just keep my mind going, the light's there. So again, this back here could get a little thicker. Because why? It's behind him, and it's away from the light. Now, here's another reason. Also, you can see how that starts to punch already. I love that. Anyway, there's two things that you're doing with your line, okay? Light and separation. So this back here can also get pretty fat because I want it to separate from this thing here. Also, like places like this, let's put a line here. By the way, I can also take my eyedropper tool and it'll put the same, if I pick a line, it'll put the same weight on it. Not the thin, thick weight, just the original weight. If I have this here or this here, see that little fin, whatever that is? These two things here and here and here, okay? This is starting to get a little bit complicated here. So I want to make sure that head shape really pops in front of that chest, okay? So that's going to be a nice, fat, thick, thin line. because it needs to read. And it needs to separate. So it is away from the light, but it also has an added use, and it needs to separate from that body. So I might go a little heavier there. By the way, when you come back and adjust these, you got to do this. So I'm going to go back to my width tool. If I just go randomly somewhere and go, I'm going to shrink this down, it will pinch. I have to go back, hover over it. It will give you the original handle, and I can pull it down and adjust it. I'm going to really thin these down here because that's really what's going to make it work. Yeah, it might be a little less, but that's fine. So I might go a little heavier here to make sure I clarify what's going on here. Same thing here. Same thing here. And then when I ink this part, because I get people and they just make the whole shape, which look at, there's a kink right there, which drives me crazy. So you fix that. You want to start here. Let's see if I can just do it this way. I don't know if I can. Now I'm going to hit my command or control. Let's hit option instead. And look, it's just going to let me control that one side. And I'm going to hit return. And then I got that kink. That's probably why he has it, or she has it, whoever did this. And then I'm going to go smooth tool and see if I can just do it that way. And it needs a little more. There we go. Maybe there. Let's see that. And it needs a little work right there. And then, you know, I'd make this one and then this one, and then the same thing here. I'd also get rid of that point. That's annoying. This one. Then I'd make that one, that one. So what I'm trying to say is you got to make choices as to how am I going to control that particular line? Can it live with another line? Or do I need it to be a separate line? Like I needed this one. This is two things. This is an occlusion shadow and it's anchoring something. And it's also two masses meeting each other. So I want a fatter line. So that's why it was important that that's separated completely. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And we want away from light here. Okay, so this back here. Go back to our width tool. That back there is going to get pretty heavy. You know, and I have to make sure that this works. That doesn't work yet. I'd have to make sure that that little transition works. I'm going to come back in here and shrink that up a little. And I just start building my line work. Make sense? You know, it's nice, fat, thick, thin line work. Now, this line work, by the way, isn't making sense because I was doing a demo of it. This stuff kind of makes sense. This makes sense. This doesn't. This is in the light. This should be a thinner line, and this should be the thicker line. Does that make sense?
Just to clarify, do you you make the decisions as you go? You don't like do all the lines first and then come back?
No, I do all the lines just dead line. I don't put any weight on them. Then I come in and I tweak them. That makes sense?
Yep.
So my final, before I do any heavy or any of the thin, thick stuff, just looks like that, basically, right? It just looks like that. Now, usually I'm doing this obviously for my own drawings. Like, okay, well, hang on. And then we'll go, you know, and color-wise, when we get to color, which we'll start talking about tomorrow, people do it different ways. This person did like a reddish version and all that kind of stuff. Okay, does that make sense, you guys? You know, I'm repeating assets. These trees back here are repeating. So I probably made one or two. I scale them, okay? These are just simple brushes that I had already. They're just making random marks. I made one of these, I think, and I repeated it. I made one of these, you know, mirrored it, repeated it, so on and so forth. All this stuff up here I repeated. These birds I repeated. Does that make sense? These things I repeated, but then I reshaped them a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
And then if you look at this, because I want to show you this tool anyway. But if you look here, I can go this before I finish it. But if I go, I want you to know this command anyway, under view, view outline. So if I go Command Y, there's the line work. Okay. Now, why that's helpful, I mean, it's helpful to see it anyway. But also, if I have a lot of, this is a fairly complex thing. If I want to get to something that's behind something else, like maybe select this, but this texture's in front, if I go Command Y, I can get my whatever tool, my white arrow tool, whatever I'm doing, and I can go behind all this stuff and I can grab a line that would be hard for me to grab if I was doing it, and then I can go back to here. If I, you know, because if I went to try and grab through it when it's the color, it will grab the foreground stuff. But if I go to view, if I go to Command Y, it will let me go through all that tangle and grab things in the back. Does that make sense? It's cut paper. Okay, so what I mean by that is, okay, so number one, I put a mask over here just so I could check what my actual ratio was. But, and here's the view of the line work. But if you look at this, so let's take this. Let's just take John. It's a bunch of cut paper. So let's ungroup. So this is group, by the way. So if I go to object, I can select a bunch of things and hit group, which is under object. And it'll just group them all together, which is why I can just grab this and grab the whole thing. But I'm going to go ungroup. Let's see. Yeah. These things are all cut paper. This is a line here. But it's all just cut paper. Let's get rid of that. It's paper dolls.
Or like a vinyl sticker, how we just
Yeah,
layering
totally.
these-
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I got some line work in here. You just tear the whole thing apart. It's a bunch of cut paper. I used to do this in cut paper, by the way. Pain in the ass.
So basically you created each shape
Uh-huh.
and then added
Yeah, and
it.
how I do that, by the way. So this thing was like, it was a demo, or I don't remember what it was. They ended up, John ended up using it for something, but like this too. Let's see if this is right. So yeah, this is Angeline's car. Same deal here. Look, and this is. Let's ungroup it under object. And by the way, I'm not creating all these shapes from scratch, okay? Like what I probably created here, I know I did, was this overall silhouette. And then this piece here, and I'll show you guys this later. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. You know, I can create like something like that. And then I can create the next shape. You know, and do my my next color. So you can see how fast I can make that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, that car probably took at the most a half an hour at the most. Probably less. Because once I have this superstructure shape, it's easy. Okay. The only thing with John is I had to get a likeness. Once I get the likeness. So let's look at this real quick. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I kind of want to jump ahead just to kind of hopefully get you guys know where we're going. Okay, so here's a good example. I did this little doodle, which is nothing, right? And this little butterfly eating lunch, okay? Because I've been doing this a long time, so I don't need a whole lot. And I knew I wanted to have all these things are all things that have been mentioned on the show, okay? So let's go back to here real quick. And then I just brought this in. and started building this. And this is my point with Illustrator. I feel like it's more about building than just straight drawing. So here's that little doodle. And I just started building my shapes over that doodle. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes, and most cool.
Oh, I love this program. And then you go, then I made I made 2 butterflies, duplicated them, flipped them, blah, blah, blah. I made 1 palm tree, duplicated them, blah, blah, blah. This back there is just a silhouette. That ship is just basically a silhouette because it's far away. More butterflies over here, so on and so forth, okay? And then I added that nice little warmth on the side of the City Hall. If you notice, that's not here. This is just a real flat, basic thing, okay? I don't know if I have another. Here's the crappy Corvette doodle I did. That's what I started with. City Hall. There's a hand reference. So on and so forth. John, the crappy drawing. So on and so forth.
I just have one quick question. So like, you know, on his hands where he's got these claws?
Yeah.
And I can tell that there's, you know, where the fingertips are, you kind of want to make that distinct from his underbody, but they kind of bulge out. Can you give any tips on like where the line weight would be?
Well, always the light's always your first
Just the
reference.
light. Okay.
So if I'm looking at this, I'm going this part of his, whatever that is, claw or whatever. This is facing the light. So I just can go, that's lighter. It's rolling under here. I might go a little fatter, and it's rolling out away from the light over here. I might go a little fatter. So anything that's coming, and by the way, that can also show, I'm getting into the weeds here, but that can also show tension.
thank you. Have a good one.
All right, you guys. I'll see you.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.